Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 546, Wednesday, September the 12th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, of course it is Wednesday, and of course you know on Wednesday I take out the trash and I have chicken. Every Wednesday I take out the trash and I have chicken. Today's no different. Okay, let's get right to it. Of course, September 11th, yesterday, everyone, of course, talking about the events of September 11th, which are very clear in most of our minds, those of us who were old enough to remember that. But I want to pay particular attention to how the liberal media took advantage of 9/11 to do exactly what you would expect they would do. Because of course, there's no point of lowness that they won't achieve at every single opportunity. And I'm not going to go through the whole list of liberal idiots, but let's just say in general, as a narrative across almost all the liberal media networks, probably the worst was Morning Joe, when he basically suggested that Trump is more dangerous than the 9/11 terrorists. But basically all the Dems across the liberal networks are basically all making this connection between the Russians hacking the DNC being far more dangerous, or just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the attacks of 9/11, saying that Trump is more dangerous than the 9/11 attackers, and the whole nine yards. I mean, this is how insane. I mean, this is how insane these people are. I mean, Trump derangement syndrome is absolutely real. I mean, it is absolutely real because, you know, you cannot imagine. Really, I would not be able to imagine. If you tell me this a couple years ago that something like this would happen, that you would have liberal media outlets using 9/11, making comparisons to Trump and the DNC hacking and Trump being worse than the terrorist, I would say you're crazy. Not even the liberal left-wing media could go that low. They wouldn't take such a risk because normal, average people would hear something like this, and regardless of what they think about Trump or anything else, even they would be appalled at these kinds of suggestions and accusations and commentary. It's beyond. Again, this is way worse than just them not liking Trump or something like this. There's a mental illness going on here. There is a true sickness, a true derangement that is going on in the minds of these people, that they would make these kinds of comments, regardless of what you think about 9/11 and what you think happened on that day. As most of you know, I don't necessarily buy into the narrative, you might say. But let's just accept the narrative for the purpose of this conversation. Let's just accept the narrative as true, because that's the narrative that they're playing in the media. But to make these types of suggestions and commentaries, I have to wonder how many people who watch CNN, MSNBC, and all the rest, how can normal, rational people who do not have Trump derangement syndrome tune in to this kind of stuff and not at some point scratch their head and go, you know, I really think these people are crazy. I can't do this anymore, and turn the channel. I have to assume that we're going to see a big ratings drop when the next ratings come out and we see the period that covered this 9/11. I have to think that they lost a lot of viewers yesterday because only insane, really crazy, or really stupid people would continue to tune into any network that would make these kinds of comments. I mean, it's beyond just hatred of Trump. You're getting into mental illness right here. This is mental illness right here. No doubt in my mind. But my guess is many of you have seen a lot of this, and you're probably as disgusted by it as I am. And these people have no shame whatsoever. Absolutely none, man. Especially Morning Joe. That guy is just, what an a-hole. What an a-hole. And this guy claims to have been a Republican. He wasn't a very good Republican, I can tell you that. Okay, let's move on from that. I've had enough of that. Okay, so I want to talk about these really strange tweets now. Papagalopoulos, of course, we talked about his interview on with Chuck Todd on MSNBC. We talked about his interview with George Stephanopoulos on ABC. And in both cases, he's literally laying out the facts that any reasonable person would come to the conclusion that, hey, sounds to me like you were set up. But not Stephanopoulos and Chuck Todd. They continued to push the Russian narrative, would literally completely ignore what Papadopoulos would say, would not attempt to connect any dots, would only drive back with another phrase that would relate to Trump and Russia collusion. And that shouldn't surprise us. So he's on The View. He goes on The View, does the exact same thing, talks about all the facts surrounding all these people that came into his field of view, which would have been, or into Papadopoulos' world, which of course would have been Misfit, Downer, and Halper. And he's explaining this on The View. Not a single one of them idiots on The View could connect the dots and see that these were clearly setups. It just goes right over their head. Of course, they probably know it. They can't be that stupid. Well, a couple of them actually can be. But you think that they would connect the dots, but they didn't. No more than Chuck Todd or George Stephanopoulos. But it's not going to work. I mean, they can keep trying this, but it's all going to come out. It's just a matter of time. It's going to take longer because we are battling the deep state and a very, very dishonest fake media. But I want to focus on the tweets of George Papadopoulos. So yesterday, or I should say on the 10th, which would have been 2 days ago when you're watching this video on Wednesday, on the 10th, Papadopoulos made 3 tweets. Let me read you those 3 tweets. The first tweet that he made on the 10th, just 2 days ago, was, "The notion that Downer randomly reached out to me just to have a gin and tonic is laughable. Some organization or entity sent him to meet me. For the sake of our republic and the integrity of the investigation, I think it's time Downer is as exposed as Christopher Steele. The notion that Downer randomly reached out to me just to have a gin and tonic is laughable. Some organization or entity sent him to meet me. For the sake of our republic and the integrity of the investigation, I think it's time Downer is as exposed as Christopher Steele." That was his first tweet. And this is essentially what he's been explaining as he's been going on these TV shows, but they never connect the dots. But it's pretty obvious here that Papadopoulos has figured out what happened, that these people were sent to him by someone else, that were working for someone else, to set him up, essentially. I mean, Papadopoulos understands, what happened to him now in hindsight. So he sends another tweet on the same day, September 10th. Says, "Would be a very big problem if British intelligence was weaponized against an American citizen." Yes, it would. Would be a very big problem if British intelligence was weaponized against an American citizen. Exactly. So he has now figured out what we have figured out a long time ago, which is that you have Downer, down the hatch Downer, you have Halper, and you have Mifsud. These 3 guys all know each other. They also know Christopher Steele. They also know Mr. Breedlove and other people in British intelligence. It's pretty obvious to me at this point, and everyone else, that there was definitely involvement in the coup plot by the British government. That would be the British intelligence agency, not just former, but current, because we know that Christopher Steele was briefing British intelligence on the work that he was doing on the dossier against Trump. So clearly, Papadopoulos is figuring out what we've been talking about here for a very long time, which is that British intelligence had a very major role to play. And, of course, we know that John Brennan was in close communication and working closely with British intelligence. So it appears that Mr. Potato Head more or less subcontracted this part of the plot out to British intelligence using these assets. The third tweet on September the 10th by Papadopoulos says, I love the USA and the brave men and women of the FBI that risk their lives to protect us. I made the mistake to lie to them, for which I am ashamed. On the other hand, I did notify them that I thought Downer was recording me with his phone. I hope that gets investigated. So he mentioned in the interview with Stephanopoulos and with Chuck Todd, I believe, that Mr. Halper, he believed was recording him because Mr. Halper pulled his phone out and set it right there on the table in front of him. But now he's saying that he thought Downer was also recording him with his phone. And he did make the statement that, hey, every time someone talks to me, they pull out their phone. He also said in the Stephanopoulos interview that he doesn't recall telling Downer anything about the Russians having Clinton emails. And he says he recalls that conversation very vividly. He remembers it very, very well. But he says he must have a different recollection than Downer, because he does not recall telling Downer anything about the Reverend Clinton having emails. So it's pretty obvious what happened here. Papadopoulos did not need to say anything to Downer. That wasn't the point. The point was simply to have the meeting, just like the Trump Tower meeting. The point was not for anything to actually come out of it, but just simply to have had the meeting. So obviously Halper called up Downer and said, hey, I need your help. Yeah, I'm working on this guy. I'm trying to run a setup, frame-up operation on him. And I thought I had him right where I wanted him. But at the moment of truth, when he was supposed to drop the information that we planted in him, and he was supposed to give it to me and feed it back to me, he choked up. He froze up. He didn't give me the info. So I need you to arrange a meeting with him. And after the meeting, then I need you just to go tell somebody, British intelligence, or pass along to Australian State Department or whoever, just pass along that Papadopoulos told you that he knows about the Russians having Hillary Clinton emails. He doesn't actually have to say it. You don't even have to get him to say it. Just go say that he said it. After all, it's your word against his. And we've already set the thing up so that it will fly, because we planted it in him. And so we know he's got the information in him because we planted it in him. And we've got other evidence that we've put together to frame him, so that when you go make this accusation, it will be believed. Because you're Downer. Former ambassador, you got all this cred. People will believe you. They won't believe Papadopoulos, especially with all the other things that we've put around him to sheep dip him, to frame him. And the Clintons would really like that favor. The Clintons would really like that favor. This is pretty obvious what has gone on here. So, the left-wing media and the deep state and all the rest, they can continue to, deny this. They can continue to try to ignore all this. It's not going to work. This is all coming out. It's all coming out. It's going to take some time. That's for sure, but it's perfectly clear what happened here. It's just a matter of it all unwinding, and I believe that after the midterms, that's exactly what is going to happen. Very quickly after the midterms, this thing is going to pick up major steam, and we're still hearing the rumors that Trump is going to declassify the Bruce Orr transcripts and also these 20 pages from the FISA application on Carter Page. Word is today, in fact, there was a story in the Daily Caller that Trump's attorneys, Trump's lawyers are looking into that now. Of course, they're going to tell him that there's a lot that he shouldn't do it, that there's things that he shouldn't reveal because of sources and methods. This is bullshit. Sources and methods about how they frame people is not going to cut it. Sources and methods about real intelligence operations or real investigations is one thing. But this had nothing to do with a real investigation or a real operation or anything like that. This was just a good old-fashioned frame-up of a presidential candidate and then president using frame-ups of people around him in his campaign. Massive, massive crimes. Huge criminal conspiracy. It's all going to come out. And Barack Obama is going to be on his hands and knees begging Trump, for a presidential pardon. Well, we have Peter been stroking us. His attorney has now come out and tried to defend the charge of this report about the media leak strategy. Strzok better get a better lawyer, okay? Because if he tries to drop this line of BS on a grand jury, they're going to laugh him out of the room. And he's probably going to be in trouble himself for perjury. There's a certain standard that lawyers are expected to live up to. And when you knowingly, as an attorney, try to drop some crap like this on the jury and the court, the judge will generally call you out on it. The evidence here is overwhelming. Overwhelming. I mean, McCabe is being prosecuted right now for that very thing, which came out as totally was brought out by the IG, Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz. But here we have a series of events and text that perfectly align with one another, where it's clear that Peter's been stroking us is talking about this media leak strategy. Then the stories comes out in the Washington Post. Then he congratulates her. And they talk about the fact that they're going to go talk about it with people at the DOJ. And the whole time we've got all these media leaks going on, including the Carter Page FISA leak, which came from Mr. Wolf. So the idea that his lawyer is trying to make the argument that, oh, well, what they were talking about there in that text was they're talking about the fact that they were working on an investigation trying to crack this media leak stuff that was happening. Media leaks. They were going after people for media leaks. That's what they were talking about. You got to be kidding me, man. No one's going to believe that. When you look at the text in relation to the things that were happening, and I doubt that even Loose Lisa Page is going to try to, because they're going to end up calling her back, because there's a lot of things that aren't adding up, and they thought she was being straight with them, but I think they're learning now that she wasn't really being all that straight with them at all. But this is definitely one that they're going to talk to her about. They're going to call Lisa Page back, and they're definitely going to ask her about this. We'll see if she's got the chutzpah to sit there and look him in the face and say, we were talking about an investigation we were doing into media leaks. Yeah, we'll see how that flies. Something tells me she's not going to cover Peter Ben Strokos' butt. And we're getting closer and closer and closer to the point where the pressure is going to be on certain individuals. Andy McCabe, Loose Lisa Page, Strzok himself, Comey. The pressure is going to be Yates. Eventually, it'll come to Yates. The pressure is going to be so great on some of these people, it's just a matter of time before one of them crack. And once one cracks and drops the dime on all the rest, ball game over. Ball game over. And the loony left-wing media is going to be found as being horribly, horribly corrupt in all of this. And the reporting on this, they're going to have a lot of egg on their face. Not really sure how they're going to try to spin off of this, how they're going to try to play it, whether they're going to try to stick to their guns and just keep riding this thing all the way, into the sunset. I don't know how they're going to try to get themselves out of this, but their credibility is going to be completely destroyed after all this is said and done. Here's some more interesting things that we're learning. Right after Trump hired Manafort, Alexandra Chalupa says that she told the Clinton campaign about Manafort's work for Yanukovych. Remember, Chalupa was working for the DNC. Then, that was in the summer, fall of 2015. Then she decides to go to Ukraine, where she's from. She goes to Ukraine and she joins this propaganda media organization, which is opposed to Yanukovych. So she's doing all this work over there, and she's, of course, joined by David Kramer, Senator Magoo, his right-hand man, and they're at this propaganda media organization that's largely Soros-funded, very connected to the EU technocrats, the Clinton-Kerry State Department, the Obama administration. They're trying to get rid of Yanukovych and trying to run him out, which they did in a putsch. So Chalupa is over there, and she's getting a lot of this information, learning that Manafort, this American lobbyist, is doing work for Yanukovych, lobbying for Yanukovych. So she goes back and tells the Clinton campaign And she says that this was right after Trump hired Manafort. Uh-oh. When did Trump hire Manafort? March of 2016. Early March 2016. That means that Chalupa told the Clinton campaign about Manafort's work for Yanukovych back in March of 2016. Before Trump had even sewn up the nomination. Before the Rotten Reverend Clinton had actually sewn up the nomination, even though she was going to get it because they were going to cheat Bernie. That's something to keep in your mind. It's an important date. We have Glenn Simpson, who told the Senate Intel Committee that he was working with Christopher Steele when Manafort was hired by the Trump team. Again, that would have been March 2016. So here we have Chalupa telling the Clinton campaign about Manafort in March of 2016. Here we have Glenn Simpson saying that he was working with Christopher Steele in March of 2016, even though up until this time we were told that Confusion GPS didn't bring Steele in until June or late May of 2016. But we now can see from this statement here by Glenn Simpson that in fact he was working with Christopher Steele as early as March of 2016, and we know that Christopher Steele was working with the U.S. State Department far earlier than that, because he was writing, and he had written over 100 reports for the U.S. State Department, Hillary Clinton, Victoria Nuland, John Kerry, regarding the Ukrainian situation. So we can see, as we get deeper and deeper into this, that a lot of these things did not begin in the summer of 2016 as is being sold, because that's what they have to sell, because they have to justify the reason for their investigations. But all the evidence from all these players shows that they were working together long before summer of 2016. A lot of this stuff goes back to the fall of 2015. And Steele has got some explaining to do, because he is now stated under oath, when he was asked in those court filings in his lawsuit, where he's being sued by Mr. Gubrev, in his court filing, he said in the court filing that he began working with Fusion GPS in June. But according to Glenn Simpson, he told the Senate Intelligence Committee that he was working with Steele when Manafort was hired. That would have been in March. Somebody is lying. Ultimately, both Steele and Glenn Simpson are going to find themselves in front of a grand jury. Maybe they'll tell the truth then, but I doubt it. Joe DeGeneva was on WMAL radio. He made the following statements. He says that Mueller, Uncle Bob, the executioner, has told close confidence that he was handed a piece of crap on collusion, but investigated it further with no fruits. Mueller telling people around him, yeah, you brought me in to do this Trump-Russia collusion. It's a piece of crap. There ain't nothing there. I investigated it, and there ain't nothing there. That's interesting. He also says that James Baker, the former FBI general counsel, is cooperating in the case against Comey. I didn't even know there was a case against Comey. That's interesting. Doesn't surprise me. James Baker, the former FBI general counsel, turning on Comey. I don't blame him. Because Comey is a guy that's going to look out for Comey. And Baker knows when it eventually hits the fan, and he knows it's going to. These people all know that the truth is coming out. They're all positioning themselves for how they're going to play their hand. And it's clear that if this is true, what DeGeneva is saying, Baker knows that Comey is certainly not going to cover for him. So Baker, it looks like, if this is true, what DeGeneva is saying, is already I guess, cooperating against Comey, and that would make perfect sense. DeGeneva also says that the secret meeting that that Comey lied about. Remember, Comey was asked when he was being interviewed in the Congress about how many times he had met with Obama, and he told us about 3 occasions. But he did not tell us the most important one. That would have been this one. This meeting, which involved Comey, Rice, Yates, Biden, and Obama. And apparently, according to, this would have been the meeting that was like January the 17th or something, and 2017. And this was the meeting where Susan Rice wrote the CYA letter. We're doing everything by the book. Obama said to do everything by the book. DeGeneva is saying that this meeting was primarily, excuse me, this meeting was primarily about how Yates was going to take down Flynn. And we know how she took down Flynn. We know that whole little operation, using Peter's been stroking us to go in there and probably falsify 302s. She used, Sally Yates used I forget the name of it now, but it was it's a law that had never been used. It's like 100 years old. The Logan Act. She used the Logan Act to go after Flynn, which really he didn't even qualify to the Logan Act. You could apply the Logan Act to anybody, any politician spoken to any foreign government official or anyone connected to a foreign government official. You could then qualify as being guilty of the Logan Act. They went after Flynn. It's clear. They went after Flynn just the same way they went after everyone in the Trump campaign. Because that was the plan, to destroy Trump and everyone around him and his campaign. And that's another reason why all these people are going to jail. Certainly Comey, Rice, Yates, maybe, probably, I don't know, Biden, I don't know. Obama will probably have to beg for a pardon. These people are going to jail, and Flynn will be exonerated. Well, people are still floating the story out there that Misfit is dead. Someone even mentioned it in the comments section. They're hearing Misfit is dead. He's not dead. We learned that he has been provided with a new identity and is staying somewhere at a very nice place. This is according to his friend who spoke to him just recently. It's pretty obvious that the British government was behind, working along with Mr. Potato Head, was a big part of the frame-up operation against Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Michael Flynn, and all the rest. The British government, when this all shakes itself out, is also going to be found to have been liable for these crimes. They're going to be very, very embarrassed. The British government is going to be very, very embarrassed when all this shakes itself out, because they had a fairly major role to play in the frame-up. And they're going to pay a price, believe me. They are going to pay a price. These British politicians that were part of this, and their names will come out. It won't be hard to know who we're talking about. Their party. So this is not just going to take down a lot of people here in the U.S. This is also going to do great damage to a lot of deep staters in the UK government. Ron DeSantis has resigned his seat in Congress to focus on the governor race. Yeah, I mean, you're watching that race down there, and it's just extraordinary. I can't believe that Gillum is actually polling as well and doing as well as he is. I mean, I didn't know there was that many socialists and illegals in Florida, but maybe there's a lot more socialists and illegals in Florida than I thought. Because last poll I saw, he's like 3 points up on DeSantis. Now, I don't believe it's going to end up that way, but it is about the middle of September. We're less than 2 months from the election. And unless those polls start to move, generously in another direction, unless these are fake polls, that could very well be possible. But it's a little troubling, and that's probably why DeSantis is having to bail out of his seat, is because he's finding out that he's got a hell of a fight on his hands. There's a lot of commies down there in Florida, apparently, or else these are rigged polls, one of the two. But he knows he's going to have to give up his seat in Congress and step up his game down there, campaign a lot harder. I think he thought that once he won the Republican primary, that it would be a cakewalk from there. But especially since the Democrats nominated a commie. But apparently, this commie is doing quite well in Florida. Let's hope that Florida doesn't choose a commie in the midterms, assuming he's not indicted before then. The wife of George Papadopoulos yesterday posted a pic of Down the Hatch Downer with the fat man, Stefan Halper. The pic was taken at an event in 2010. 2010. Papadopoulos' wife has posted a picture of Down the Hatch Downer and Stefan Halper together at an event in 2010. You know, his wife is she's fairly very supportive, obviously, of him, and she is obviously very engaged. She's been doing media interviews, out defending him, and she has been making a very strong case that there was a setup as well. And, you know, finding this picture of Downer and Halper is something that none of us had seen. We knew that they knew each other because we knew that they were at Cambridge on the night that Carter Page had been invited there. Christopher Steele was also there. Steele, Downer, and Halper, and probably, haven't confirmed this, we believe maybe Misfit was there, but we know Downer, Halper, and Christopher Steele were all in attendance at Cambridge that night when Madeline Halfbright was giving a speech. Okay, so we got a couple minutes left. Just want to talk about the hurricane that's brewing out there, heading straight for the coast of North South Carolina. Obviously, we have a lot of subscribers on this channel, quite a few subscribers who are in North Carolina, South Carolina. I don't know how close to the coastline you are, but I know Maura, the lovely and talented Maura, is from North Carolina. I don't know how close I think she told me once she was not too far from Raleigh. I'm not sure where that is, but I think that's not too far from the coast. I know, is Patty, are you from South Carolina? I think you are. So if you're in South Carolina or North Carolina and you're within an hour of the coastline, I highly recommend that you board up your windows, grab your valuables, what you can, and get out. A friend of mine down in Florida years ago decided he would ride out a hurricane. He nearly died from the experience. He was on the phone with me for about 45 minutes before we lost connection. He lost connection on his landline, then he called me on his cell. He was holding the phone and telling me, describing what he was experiencing. I could hear it. The roof was, I kept hearing this bang, 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 bang. He told me that was his roof bouncing up and down. He sent his wife and kids away, but he didn't want to get looted, so he said, I'm going to stick around. He sent his wife and kids to his mother-in-law's, and he said, I'm going to stay and watch the house. He nearly was killed in the process. Their house was pretty much destroyed. He barely survived. Do not take that risk. If you're in North South Carolina, if you're within an hour of the coastline, Maura, Patty, whoever, any of you people in South North Carolina, and there's maybe some other states at risk as well, don't take the risk, man. A Category 4 hurricane is nothing to screw around with. Nothing to screw around with. Thank you so much for tuning in. Y'all take care. Good night. Bye.